Welcome to 400 Years, a channel that explores Black history, heritage, and perspectives. We are dedicated to remembering and reclaiming our past through meaningful discussions. Join us as we shine a light on the often overlooked narratives that have been silenced, suppressed, or ignored, from the haunting legacy of the Atlantic slave trade to the profound impact of Black literature and Black culture. In this episode, we're going to tell you about the bravest, baddest man you've never heard of, Mississippi State Senator Charles Caldwell. Born in the bowels of the slave South, Senator Caldwell stared down murderous, racist thugs with courage and grit. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore the rich tapestry of Black history and celebrate the resilience, strength, and triumphs of our ancestors. In 1834, Mississippi was a hellhole of degradation. It was a state that heavily relied on large-scale labor, with a significant population of enslaved Black people. The institution of slavery was deeply entrenched in Mississippi's economy and society, shaping the lives of both enslaved individuals and white residents. Slavery was brutal and harsh throughout the United States, but conditions for slaves were often worse in Mississippi compared to the Upper South, like Virginia and North Carolina. Slaves who were sold from the Upper South to Mississippi were also forcibly separated from their families and communities, which was an additional traumatic experience. Indeed, for the enslaved, few fates were worse than being sold down the river, a phrase that, from its very beginning, meant not just a betrayal, but a betrayal that leads to a significantly worse situation. Nobody wanted to be a slave in Mississippi. In the first place, Mississippi had a climate and geography that was ideal for large-scale plantations, especially those producing cotton, sugar, and rice. These crops were labor-intensive crops that required long, strenuous hours of work, often under very harsh conditions. Secondly, Black people in Mississippi during this time were subject to oppressive conditions. Enslaved people faced grueling labor on plantations, working in agriculture, primarily cultivating cotton and other crops that formed the backbone of the state's economy. Black Americans endured physical abuse, severe punishment, neglect, malnutrition, extremely long working hours, and generally lived in deplorable living conditions. Families were often torn apart, as they could be sold or separated at the whim of their white enslavers. Slaves were denied basic rights and freedoms, treated as property, and had no legal status or autonomy. The state's legal system supported and protected the interests of slaveholders, ensuring that the institution of slavery remained intact. Despite the unimaginable hardships they faced, enslaved Black Americans in Mississippi demonstrated resilience, maintaining cultural practices, traditions, and community bonds. They often relied on oral traditions to pass down stories, knowledge, and resistance strategies from one generation to the next. This is the environment into which Charles Caldwell was born and lived his whole life. His birth year is believed to be 1831, though precise details about his early life remain unknown. Born into slavery, Caldwell later became a skilled blacksmith in Clinton, a small town near Jackson, Mississippi. As a result of his craftsmanship, Caldwell enjoyed relatively more autonomy compared to other plantation slaves, earning him significant respect within the community. After the Civil War, his status allowed him to venture into politics. In 1868, Caldwell was one of 16 Black Republicans who actively participated in the Mississippi Constitutional Convention. However, the proposed constitution they crafted was ultimately rejected in a statewide referendum. Despite this setback, Caldwell's involvement in politics marked a pivotal moment for his journey from a life of slavery to one of influence and participation in shaping Mississippi's political landscape. In 1870, he was elected to the Mississippi State Senate. He served in the Senate for 5 years, and during this time he became known as a staunch radical Republican, voting for both the 14th and 15th Amendments, as well as additional measures to bring racial equality to the state. Caldwell's primary focus during his time in office was resisting a wave of anti-Republican and anti-Black violence, which spread through Mississippi as anti-Reconstruction Democrats were determined to reclaim the state legislature. It is estimated that between 1870 and 1875, The Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist organizations killed several hundred black men and women, as well as some white Republicans. Despite the violence, Caldwell believed in the political process, and in 1875, he invited a prominent Democratic speaker to open a major Republican Party rally before the election. Mississippi started allowing freedmen to vote in 1867, setting the stage for the 1875 election to further integrate black men into the state's political landscape. The Mississippi Republican Party scheduled political rallies on September 4th at Utica, Clinton in Hinds County, and Vernon in neighboring Madison County, anticipating the November 2nd polls. Clinton, just under 10 miles west of Jackson, the state capital, saw black Republican families congregate at Moss Hill, a former plantation ruined by Union forces during the 1863 Vicksburg Campaign. Attendance varied from estimates of 1,500 to 2,500, mostly freedmen and their kin, enjoying a day of picnicking and political discourse. Around 75 white attendees were present, including 18 armed, intoxicated whiteliners, essentially the Democratic Party's paramilitary branch of ex-Confederate soldiers and their kin in Mississippi. Anticipating racial tensions, Republican Governor Adelbert Ames was supposed to address the crowd. But instead, Captain H.T. Fisher, a former Union officer and local Republican newspaper editor, took his place. Emphasizing open discussion and educating new voters about elections, Caldwell and other Republican leaders from Hinds County invited the local Democratic Party to send a speaker. Democratic State Senate candidate Amos R. Johnston spoke for an hour without disruption. However, when Fisher took the stand, whiteliners from Raymond heckled him. Republican organizers, including Caldwell, pleaded for peace, but the afternoon's events quickly spiraled into violence. Eugene Wellborn, another rally organizer, recounted the whiteliners drawing weapons and aiming at the crowd. He likened the sudden burst of gunfire to a downpour, resulting in 3 white and at least 5 black deaths, including 2 children. But the September 4th violence was only a precursor to the impending racial massacre. Fueled by baseless rumors of a black plot against the town, Clinton's mayor called for backup. Hundreds of armed whiteliners arrived in Clinton by train, their ranks increasing to several hundred by dusk. Wellborn recounted the brutal hunting of black men by the whiteliners, akin to shooting birds. Sarah Dickey, an Ohioan white educator who moved to Mississippi to teach black women and children, penned a letter to President Ulysses S. Grant recounting the harrowing scene and emphasizing that the true extent of the Clinton massacre was untold. While no additional white Democrats were killed post-September 4, the black death toll was estimated to be between 35 and 50, with many black victims remaining nameless. William P. Hoffa, a white Republican from Pennsylvania running for re-election as a peace justice, was also lynched. Regardless of numerous pleas for federal aid by Governor Ames, Wellborn, Dickey, and others, President Grant declared on September 13th that he was weary of the South's annual autumnal disturbances, leading to a policy of non-intervention in Mississippi and the former Confederacy. This event became known as the Clinton Riot, or, more commonly, the Clinton Massacre. But the year's end of 1875 did not conclude the reign of terror in Clinton, despite the high number of victims in September. Caldwell was considered absolutely fearless by his contemporaries, white and black. He was a crack shot and racists everywhere feared him, although he used his power for peace. After the massacre, in an act of self-defense, he led a unit of militia through Clinton to protect his community. For that, he was marked for death. So Caldwell's involvement in arranging the event, advocating for black rights, and standing up for black self-defense placed him in the crosshairs of the vicious, racist ruffians who constantly tormented black citizens, who only wanted to exercise their political freedoms. On December 25, 1875, Caldwell went into the town of Clinton to learn about his nephew who had been threatened earlier that day. An acquaintance of his, Buck Cabell, invited Caldwell to drink a toast in celebration of Christmas. Caldwell did not want to go, preferring to go home to celebrate Christmas with his wife, but his friend was so insistent that he relented. It was a fateful miscalculation. The two men went to the basement of Chilton's store on the northeast corner of Leek and Jefferson Streets. While they stood in the basement, they touched their glasses, apparently a signal for the assassins. Caldwell was shot in the head as he stood with his back to the window. Wounded but still conscious, Caldwell asked to be carried out so he could die like a man. His last request was granted. He was carried out into the street so that all could see he was defiant. Despite his injuries, Caldwell gathered himself together, stood up, straightened his clothes. Then he looked directly at the assassins and said, "Remember, when you kill me, you kill a gentleman and a brave man. Never say you killed a coward. I want you to remember it when I am gone." At that instant, some 40 shots rang out, delivering the fatal blow. His younger brother Samuel, who had nothing to do with politics, was also killed. Later, racist ruffians burst into Caldwell's home where his wife had laid out the bodies of the two brothers and raised a ruckus, turning the bodies out of the coffin and cursing them. Such as cowards do, these men couldn't stand up to Caldwell in life, so they could only do so when he could no longer defend himself. No one was ever punished for the crime or those who murdered innocent people at the Clinton rally. Charles Caldwell and other local Southern leaders represented, perhaps better than anyone else, the opportunities that existed under Reconstruction for freed people to develop a potent and responsible class of leaders. That so many influential black people met the same end as Caldwell illuminates the violence on which democratic power ultimately rests. This has been 400 Years. Thank you for joining us on this journey and exploring the inspiring story of Mississippi State Senator Charles Caldwell. We want to express our gratitude to each and every one of you for watching our videos. We hope it provided you with valuable insights along the way. If you enjoyed learning about Senator Caldwell, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with others who might find it interesting. Remember to subscribe to 400 Years for more exciting topics in the future. Thank you once again for your support, and we'll see you in the next video.